about the power of programmatic sequencing. But I decided on Sunday that organising an event wasn't hard enough, and so I scrapped my presentation and I decided to build one from scratch. Because I believe there's a much more important topic to discuss, and it's one that I come across more and more often, in that there are a lot of secrets in this industry. So I thought it would be a great opportunity, given that I only have 20-25 minutes to talk to you, to try to tell you all of the secrets and things that you may not be told about that are happening within the programmatic space. Because in 2015, we threw over $5 billion into advertising, digital advertising. That's a 20% leap from the year before. So we're clearly putting more effort into this area, but I see some big hurdles happening, and some of the culprits tend to be the larger agencies. So it's not that I like to pick fights with them, it's just a coincidence. So I'm going to go into a few of the confidential things now. And I'll start with one that's been popping up more and more. You've probably heard this word before. I wrote it into the Word document, and actually there was a squiggly line underneath because it's not a real word, but it's become a popular word, and that's viewability. So as Martin mentioned, there was a little battle on LinkedIn because I saw an article posted called Programmatic Targeting for Dummies. And I love an easy read, so I decided to click on it. And it was by the head of trading for one of the big agency groups. And what he did was a scientific study where he analysed 6 different DSPs. I said, great, it's getting better. But the performance metric that he used to test them on was viewability. So if any of you aren't familiar with this term, it refers to Google's definition. 50% of the pixels loading within your browser for a continuous 1 second. So I said, okay, that's really interesting. If that's the point of engagement that we're measuring, then it really becomes a topic of observation. It starts to get quite philosophical. So I thought this image was fitting, because if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? So let's do a test. Oh, did everybody get that? Yep. You did? Awesome. So there was an ad 2 down on the right. Can I get a show of hands who here saw Samsung? No? Who here saw William Hill? No? Who here saw American Express? No? Okay. Alright, well let's go back and see what it was. It was American Express, but there's only half of it because that's all that counts. So let's go forward now. Things got even weirder, because now there's a form of advertising called native advertising. Okay? Now, the premise for native advertising is an ad that appears within the natural environment of a page. So it's really built around you not actually noticing it. However, now they're doing viewability on native ads. Okay? So this is where it gets really spooky. So I'm going to give you a test, and I'm going to give you some warning now. Here we go. Did anybody see the ad? No one saw it? Okay. I'm not going to give you a multiple choice because this was really hard. Let's go back and see what it was. It's hidden right there in the middle. Yeah, Sherman's Travel, how cruise ships fill their unsold cabin. So you see the point here is that we're really starting to digress into metrics that don't matter. So I asked the question, if an ad loads in a browser and no one is there to notice it, does it really matter? Okay? A bit of a philosophical play just to start us off. Alright, number 2. I see this a lot in the proposals that come across our desk to audit and reports and so on, and it's a very scary one. It's called ad fraud. Right? So ad fraud and brand safety, I'm going to talk about both of them. Now, ad fraud are bots that steal up your impressions, okay? And they usually affect impressions. To a lesser extent, they affect clicks. But what we found is that if you set a goal that occurs beyond a click, like say, a point of engagement or a lead or a sale, what happens to these little online gremlins out there trying to eat up all your ad dollars? Well, if you ignore them, they simply go away. So if you optimize to a point after an impression or a click, ad fraud matters a lot less. So what I wanted to do was also look at the concept of brand safety. Okay? Now we did a little rating where we evaluated different networks based on their level of brand safety, and we looked at things like blacklisting and whitelisting. We looked at negative news adjacency and all different features to protect your brand. Okay? And what we actually found was that while most of the news and rhetoric is coming from the big agencies about brand safety, an analysis by SimilarWeb showed that the largest advertisers for the largest agencies, and we use the UK, so not to potentially upset anybody, that the largest advertisers were using the least brand safe network. So it highlights the point that you actually need diversity and you need a mix of channels to be able to test these things, okay? So if you only lean on one network, you're not simply ticking the box of doing programmatic, you're only just starting, okay? So a lot of what Dave and Mike spoke about in test, learn, fail, learn, retest and so on, what's so important is actually a point about actually knowing what it all means and what to do about it. Now, third point, time-based programmatic. So I refer to this because as marketers, we all started by thinking of things in campaigns, okay? And they always had time limits on them. You had an offer for a season. But all of a sudden, this concept of always on came about. And it's a really important metric, but it's one that I find that our solutions team have to educate and re-educate on the value of, because there's this false premise in the industry that always on is more of a search thing, okay? But I would ask every advertiser this: if you believe you should sell products always on, then you should be running an always on strategy. So what we did was we looked at some of the campaigns that we'd run in a time-based manner. And you can see from the space between the first 3 months of the first campaign to the first 3 months of the second, something happened in the middle there. What happened? Well, we don't know because the CPA jumped up, but there's a missing gap. And what happens when there's a gap of information? We have this false blame phenomenon. So if you don't know why something occurred, you tend to look at, oh, it was probably that we got the wrong creative, or the offer wasn't right for the market, or no, your shoppers just like to go into store. So we're starting to realise the power of always on, and we found that out especially in the third campaign, because what happened after the third month, things started to really fire up. Because optimization allowed us to move the performance down lower and lower. And the ability to do this is based on a technique or a algorithm that's built into most RTB platforms, which is based around predictive modeling. So it looks at what you did, and then it analyzes what worked and what didn't, and it focuses on what worked, okay? So the idea of it is not to change up your marketing team and really upset people and, you know, not focus on Mother's Day and Christmas. It's actually to establish a baseline. And once you establish that baseline, you can have the fluctuations of campaigns sit over them. So most people in this room are in a more advanced state than some we speak to. But if you are still kind of toying with the idea, I would say that the danger of trying to stay in market at all times is much smaller than the danger of not. Because what you do is you actually get a much calmer marketing team, because things are always happening. But what always on actually means is always on accountability. So you can always be asking what happened and what didn't, and you miss out on that false blame phenomenon. Big one here, number 4, not disclosing attribution models. I'm going to throw out a big statement here because there's a lot of talk around ad fraud, but what I believe is that the biggest form of ad fraud is attribution ad fraud, okay? Because I speak to a lot of marketers that have no idea what their attribution model is. And let's just think about that for a minute, because if we were in the finance world and you had an investment manager handling your funds and they came back with a report and that report wasn't clear as to what currency it was in, that would seem a little weird. You know, 3,000% growth in rupees doesn't sound that great. So not disclosing attribution models is a massive one. And actually I just want to get an understanding in the audience. Who here is pretty clear on the difference between post-click, post-view? Most of you? Cool. For those that aren't, I'll give you a quick understanding of it. Post-view means if you actually saw the ad, and when I say saw, I mean in a viewability metric, so 50% of those pixels loaded in your browser for a continuous 1 second, you saw it, and you convert somewhere along the way within a window of, say, 10 days or 30 days or whatever it may be, you count as a conversion. Post-click is when you actually clicked on the ad and then converted along the funnel, okay? So there's a big difference between the two, and I wanted to show you a bit of a view of some of the data that we've done with an e-commerce client of our own to show you the difference. So here's an e-commerce client that we have, and we've sliced it up into both post-click and post-view, and we've used common windows, so 1, 7, and 30-day windows. Now you can see that from a click perspective, banners don't get clicked on that much, but when they do get clicked on, they usually don't result in a conversion straight away. So post-click 1 day is a pretty small amount. Post-click 7 starting to climb. Post-click 30 a little bit higher. But post-view, wow, you're really killing it now. So what's the difference? Well, we're in a small market. So to be honest, you could typically show everybody in Australia an ad at a relatively low price. And when I say show them the ad, I use the term loosely because if you're on the right-hand column and you're running an impression buy, everybody counts. So it's a very generous model. So what does the industry tell you is the standard? Well, they said, well, let's take one of the bigger columns of the click because that's believable, and let's take a middle column from the view and we'll just add them together and say that's your metric. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily the wrong metric for you because it depends on the product, the price, the sales cycle and so on. But it's really important for you to know exactly how it's being measured. And the idea is actually to be able to test different measurements and what works for you as a business, because it's not always the same. Another point is that there's a big error magnitude. So if you look, as you move further away from your true goals as an advertiser, the error margin gets much bigger, okay? And its cost, like you see. And as you get closer, the little man gets happier. So, number 5, reporting magic tricks. So these are ones I see quite often, and we get a lot of reports over our desk because one of the first processes that we do is benchmark performance and audit. Okay? So one of the biggest ones that I want you guys to look out for is when you get reports that have missing columns. Okay, this is the invisible magic trick of some of the agencies. There's no budget, there's no CPA. So there's just total numbers. Is it good, is it bad? No one knows. Another one that we see quite often is only graphs without trends. Is it good? I don't know. All right. Even worse, sometimes selective timeframes. Okay, it's really good. Okay, so some of the red flags to be aware of, because I want this thing to be informative. I want you guys to leave here and actually know exactly what to do. Totals only, graphs only with trends missing, hiding negatives, okay? And one that was the most interesting recently, we spoke to an advertiser and there were some columns missing and we said, okay, we can work with that. We'll just times clicks by CPC, we'll get budget and give you a CPA. Just send us the data and we'll change it for you. And they said to us, actually, our agency said this data's from Tableau and Tableau only makes PDFs. So what's more important for advertisers, I believe, today is not to build big, clunky data management platforms that take years to integrate with and slice up things in beautiful charts. It's actually to understand and truly understand what your reporting means. Now we're getting into a really kind of heated debate here. There was an article recently in Mumbrella that sparked this up again. And this is a problem that wasn't always the case. So I've been in the programmatic space for about 7 years now, starting with my time over at Fairfax, more on the publisher side of things, and obviously with benchmarking on the demand side. But DSPs popped up around 2007, and an interesting phenomenon took place because advertisers started working directly with technology, and the agencies weren't happy about that. So they built out their own in-house solution to tackle that problem. Now the problem comes when the agency says there's a mandate that they can only use that in-house vendor. Because what happens is a misalignment of independence. And as an advertiser, you really need, if you're not going to do it on your own and build out a big data science team, to trust that they have your best interests at heart. So this is a big problem in the space now, and the advertisers are fighting back, the power's coming back into your hands, and what's happening is a bit of a dissolution of the agency trading desk, and you know, so it's starting to change, but it's still quite a big problem. And finally, probably the worst sin I'm seeing of the 7 deadly programmatic sins is setting the bar low. And what do I mean by that? I mean minimizing expectations. And it's a really big problem because programmatic advertising can be a very, very powerful tool. So parking your expectations on the lower metric, on what I call the sell side, is not doing us any favors. Because advertising has shifted quite a fair bit over the years. And what it historically was is a space where the publisher called the shots. They told you how much to buy an ad for and what their audience looked like. And as an advertiser, we said, okay, yeah, sounds good. But now we get to pick exactly where the ads go and where they're placed and who they speak to and the story that flows afterwards. So the onus is coming back on us. So what I want to give you is 5 rules to follow to stomp out the fluff, okay? This is how we're going to do it. So we're going to stomp it out together, and it's a very 5 easy, memorable things to follow, okay? So S, strategy. Is the strategy that your agency or vendor giving you aligned with your true business goals, okay? Does it align with the ability for them to talk to your customers in a staggered way? And are they speaking to your customers at each of their different mindsets, or just ticking the box at one certain layer, whether it be sales or awareness, okay? Number 2 is technology, all right? Who owns the technology? Really in this space, we are reliant on technology for us to scale up, but somebody needs to have a cost over that, somebody needs to operate it, and you know, for you to understand whether it's in-house proprietary or whether it's something that is borrowed, and what does it actually do? They're all fair questions, and we should start with understanding it before being disconnected from it. Because DSPs were built by developers, but they're meant to be used by marketers to translate messages to customers. So there's a big disconnect. Okay, so we need to close that. Operations. Every powerful technology requires a team that knows how to utilize it, and not only does it require it, it makes it better. Okay? There's a great story about a grand chess master named Kasparov who was challenged to a match by IBM's artificial intelligence team called Deep Blue. Okay, so he played the match and he won. But But he played again and he lost. And he had a big ego, he was pretty devastated. So he decided, no, I'm not done yet, and he built a new style of chess called advanced chess. Okay? An advanced chess means that an AI, a machine, can partner up with a person, and they can create this team. They called it a centaur. Right? It was very mythical, and they could play machine. All right? But something really interesting happened. When the combination of machine and human played a robot, the combination won. So when the human could add insights and experience and hindsight and things that only we can do, the combination was very powerful. So you have the right, and you should, and I implore you to, understand what does the operational team look like that handle this space. Okay? Are you just dealing with an account manager? Who's trafficking? Who's selecting publishers? Who's managing that? Tag management, who's building those tags and rules within that script? What does that whole framework look like? And if you don't know or you can't find out, clearly the power that operates it is removed. Media, as we mentioned before, there's a lot of mandates and conflicts of interest at the moment in the space. But as advertisers, you do have the right to know exactly which channels and sources are being used. And that should be a point of optimization. You also have the right to know why things are being used in the first place, if they're selected just as an in-house vendor or that's a platform that's really working for you. And finally, price. Okay? And I'm referring not only to the price of the media, because oftentimes when you focus on CPA campaigns, the higher you pay per CPM or CPC, the better the performance. Okay? I'm also talking about the price that you're paying to the partner and what value you're getting from it. So we've spoken a lot about some scary things that are happening in this industry, and hopefully you've got a little bit more light on, what possibilities can come out of it. But the aim of today is actually to empower you to take control of your advertising. And ultimately it's about focus. Okay? If you're working with a team that have had their hands full in the traditional space, but then tacked on search and then tacked on programmatic, it becomes a very, very difficult challenge to undertake with detail. So what I want you to do is leave here today and, after listening to the speakers, to have the tools to be able to make the decisions for yourself, because ultimately we can't test, learn, or evolve if we don't know all the ingredients within it. Thank you.